Hello, I'm Alan Kohler, founder of Eureka Report, which is now part of Intelligent Investor, finance presenter on ABC News and a columnist for the New Daily.
And I'm James Thomson, senior Chanticleer columnist at the Australian Financial Review.
And we are The Money Cafe. Now, James, before we get into this week's episode, I want to mention that our podcast is up for a Listener's Choice Award as part of the Australian Podcast Awards. So Logies.
Fantastic. Yeah.
It's the podcast Logies.
Yeah.
Now,
Hard to see how it'd lose, I would have thought.
Well, exactly.
But just in case.
I think we need the gold Logie.
The gold.
But what we need is for everyone who's listening to vote for us. So please head to the Australian Podcast Awards, www.australianpodcastawards.com/voting. Search for The Money Cafe with Alan Kohler and cast your vote and help us win.
Fantastic. How good would that be?
We need to beat that. We need to beat that other Chanticleer podcast.
Very popular, Alan.
Is it?
Yeah, hugely, hugely.
Okay, so you've had a housing summit this week.
Yes.
I had a housing summit on Monday night.
You did on live television. Yours looked more painful than mine, to be frank. How did you survive?
It only took an hour.
I know.
Yours took 2 days.
Yeah, well, one day on residential, one day on commercial.
Yes.
I sort of left both more optimistic and less optimistic about the housing crisis.
Okay, please explain.
Everybody at least understands there's a crisis. All 3 levels of government understand there's a crisis. And so the property industry is pleased with that everyone's on the same page or relatively on the same page. The problem is getting stuff out of the ground.
Does the property industry think there's a crisis?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
What crisis do they think there is?
Not enough housing, not enough affordable housing, paralysis of planning, difficult tax environment, and surging costs. You know, the cost of building has gone up somewhere between, depending on who you believe, 25 to 30% in the last 3 years. And
taxation on new houses is somewhere between 30 and 50%.
Yeah, 30 to 40% of the price of a building. Yeah,
that's right. So, in fact, in the Q&A on Monday night, someone said it was 50%.
Yeah, well,
anyway,
I think it's pretty rubbery, but somewhere between 30 and 50, take your pick. So, but what I sort of took away from it is, we're in this real, and I know you're the, sort of an expert on this, but we want affordable housing. You can't have affordable housing anywhere near cities. It's basically impossible. You know, all the town planners, they want this urban infill around transport links. So lots of apartment buildings around the local train station.
So why can't you have that?
Well, you can. It's just no family is going to be able to afford it. The only people who can afford to buy an apartment, a new apartment at the moment, are rich baby boomers and downsizers. It's completely like the developers are saying there's no way you can build an apartment, even an apartment building for a family of 4 near a train station when they've got for their 750 grand. It's just impossible. So where does that lead you? Out to the back blocks, urban sprawl. But urban sprawl doesn't work because governments can't afford to put in the infrastructure to service those areas. So we're sort of in this catch-22. We all know what the problem is. We all know how to solve it. But how do we make these buildings closer to the city more affordable? Now, the property sector, the developers, who both simultaneously want governments to get out of the way and then want governments to provide all sorts of subsidies and incentives, they say we're going to need government support. Governments are going to have to step in and make the cost of housing affordable, which is what they're trying to do with this Housing Australia Future Fund and that sort of thing. So, but I just don't quite get how these forces are going to come together, because then those forces collide with NIMBYism and heritage, all relatively reasonable concerns. And so we get this sort of paralysis at various levels. So everyone knows what the problem is. We sort of know how to fix it, but nothing's particularly happening, or it's happening very slowly.
Yep.
And there was a few developers, and I think this is a really interesting point, sort of saying, there was a few people saying there's 5 years to fix this, because that's when the wealth transfer is going to start. $6 trillion of wealth from boomers to younger people is going to start. If we haven't sorted it out by then, you can lock in this generational equality, because no one's going to be able to get into the housing market if they don't have access to property through their family. And then there was a few developers who were saying, look, the government's got 5 years to fix this, because people will be on the streets and the politics won't matter, because, the implication that I took for it is people will just be sort of not quite rioting on the streets.
Was there any explicit discussion about the housing targets that the Victorian government, at least, and I think the New South Wales government is also giving to councils to say you've got to build this many houses? I think it's in Victoria, it's over 20 years.
Yeah.
Which is basically a doubling of, more or less, a doubling of each council's housing.
Yes, and the response in Victoria is a lot more. I mean, we're in leafy Hawthorn and close to leafy Camberwell. I think the response is to have 9,000 more housing units in Camberwell, mainly, again, around transport links and apartments.
Yeah, that's right.
And stuff.
But so was there...
People are saying the targets are good. Targets help.
But are the developers saying they're not going to be able to do that?
Well,
or they can do it, but each one will cost $1 million.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Well, I think a bit of both.
Yeah.
No one's quite sure whether the councils can get their bums into gear to get it done. No one's quite sure whether there's enough tradespeople to build this stuff. And then no one's quite sure whether they can build an apartment in one of these areas for, as you say, less than $1 million. So, I come away from it thinking, again, like, if you have that archetypal family, 2 kids, $750,000 budget, where are they buying? I don't know.
Yeah.
On the urban fringe where the transport infrastructure is stuck.
Well, they haven't got a backyard there either. I mean, one of the interesting things was, the last question on Q&A was, is the Australian dream dead?
Yeah.
Right? Of the Australian dream is to have a house with a backyard, right? According to this questioner. And I kind of said, well, I think it's probably dead, yeah. I mean, but what I should have said is that it is dead, because even if you buy a new house, in Tarneet or Armstrong Creek, it hasn't got a backyard anymore.
No. I
mean, or not much of one to speak of.
Yeah, but that's a lifestyle choice, isn't it?
No, but you can't buy them. I mean, there aren't. Yeah, you could probably get a backyard if you bought an existing house in Bendigo. But
people can have smaller houses on existing. Yeah,
but everyone's got big houses.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's what I mean. It's a choice.
No, because each child has to have a bedroom.
Yes,
and each bedroom has to have an ensuite. So the houses are quite big.
Yeah. The one bit of, and this isn't much comfort, because it's not a sort of nice way to get there, but the one, Joe Masters, the economist from Barrenjoey, sort of made the point that the unemployment rate is quite linked to the number of people who live in a house rate.
Is that right?
So as unemployment goes up, people move back in with their parents.
Yeah, of course.
They get taken a boarder. They get a flatmate, whatever it is. And so that may actually help us a bit, reducing the need for housing.
Did she have a chart of that?
Not sure. She was speaking on a panel, so she may have a chart of it. But
I'll ring her up. I'll find out.
Yeah.
That'll be a good chart to have. The other thing that interested me about the summit was a piece you had yesterday of David Harrison of what's his company?
Charter Hall.
Charter Hall.
Yeah.
Who you said was as blunt as a spoon. I love it.
He's a brutal speaker. Absolutely no nonsense.
But what was interesting was he said that this working from home nonsense is over or something. But what I got was that it's not over. People are still working from home. It's just that the companies aren't able to reduce their office space. Yeah. Because when everyone's in the office, they still need that same amount of office space, even if it's empty on Monday and Friday.
They still expect a desk. People still expect a desk.
Right.
So, look, the office picture is really not complicated. It's the haves and have-nots again, like in everything in Australia. If you've got a really premium office building in the right location, in Sydney or Melbourne. And that's very close to the CBD. It's definitely not Docklands in Melbourne, and it's definitely not Darling Park in Sydney. Those are no-go zones. If you've got an office in the right place, you're sweet. Occupancy will be high. The value of that office has come down, but it won't come down any further. And in fact, there might be some interest in those offices because they're pretty rare. But if you've got a B or C grade building, and there's lots of those as you walk around town, any town, whatever town you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, so he did say second grade buildings, forget about it, you're in trouble. So what is a second grade building? Just is that location, or is that the age and so on of the building?
It's more about location. It's more about the age of the building. So it's your 40 to 50-year-old building that doesn't have a whole lot of natural light, that is difficult to, doesn't have end-of-trip facilities, where you can have a shower after your bike ride and all that sort of stuff. Doesn't have the latest whiz-bang heating and cooling, so it's not very environmentally friendly. So who wants to move into that? That's not where any tenants want to be when you've got, good choice. So, and the problem is you can do those buildings up to a certain extent, but what bank is going to want to lend to you to do those buildings up? No bank. And so you're stuck in this sort of vicious cycle. Yeah.
So if you're an investor who wants to invest in companies that own offices,
yeah,
you really got to be careful.
Oh, you got to be careful
what you buy.
Absolutely. Yep. And they all say our portfolio's fine. We got the good stuff. Yeah. There's still a bad sentiment around offices.
What do you think of the new CEO of Westpac?
Yeah, I've had a little bit to do with him. Very straight talker. He comes from a very high-achieving Queensland family. Sister won a gold medal at Sydney. Brother was a boxing champion. Won a
gold medal at what?
Water polo.
Oh, yeah.
His brother won a gold medal at boxing in Manchester at the Commonwealth Games. He was on track to be an Olympic swimmer. I mean, whatever, but
now his Olympic sport is banking.
Banking, yeah. He's a highly regarded investment banker. I think he gets on really well with his clients. As I say, very straight talking, internal candidate. I mean, the thing about Westpac is if you think back to 2020 when the current CEO, Peter King, was appointed, that bank was in a total mess. They just had this Austrac scandal that cost the CEO and the chairman their jobs. And so, at least they've got they're choosing from they've chosen this guy, an internal candidate, from a position of stability. So I think that's the important thing for Westpac at this stage.
Good for them. So I was interested in AirTrunk.
Yeah, amazing.
So that was last week's deal, $24 billion.
Yep.
Blackstone buys it for $24 billion. Nobody's ever heard of it until suddenly they've heard of it because it's worth $24 billion. You've been doing a bit on you had a piece saying stuff about AirTrunk we didn't know.
Yeah.
So what's that?
I think the thing is everyone hears AirTrunk and they think about AI. And that's fair enough. They make hyperscale data centers. They build hyperscale data centers across Asia. Microsoft, Amazon, Google are their big clients. But we had Robin Cooter at the Property Summit. He's the founder of AirTrunk. Amazing story. 45-year-old bloke. Came out to Australia from Bangladesh when he was 18. Built this thing in 9 years from an office in North Sydney. Just, as you say, completely under the cover of darkness almost. But he was saying, we actually haven't got to the AI bit yet. Most of this is about companies migrating to the cloud. They've had servers at their premises or somewhere close to them, and they're moving to the cloud. So we actually haven't got to the AI bit yet. Most of the AI development, it's called training, to teach these large language models how to make decisions and offer advice and all that sort of stuff. That's all happening in America still. He thinks it'll come to Asia, and when it does, we'll see this next wave of demand. So I think that's the thing we've missed. This company is at the very early stage of this big AI rollout, and that's why Blackstone's paid such a big price.
Right.
So yeah, I thought it was it's such an interesting story. So yeah. It's such a good story.
Sure.
It's a great story about what's possible in Australia, I reckon.
Yeah. And this guy is staying with the business, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he's still got a stake. heavily invested and very passionate about it. So
is he a billionaire yet?
yes, he is now.
He is now.
Yeah,
good for him. So we've got a lot of questions. Let's move on.
Okay.
So before we go to the questions, let's have a quick word from our sponsor.
Think you can spot a scam? When can you access your super? What exactly does the S&P ASX 200 index track? Only 26% of Aussies passed InvestSMART's new financial literacy quiz, Test Your InvestSMARTs. Put your financial knowledge to the test and you could win a $10,000 portfolio with InvestSMART. Take the test and reap the rewards. Visit www.testyourinvestsmarts.com.au. Terms and conditions apply.
Okay. First question is from Bridie. I've recently started using cash for as many transactions as possible. I have young children. I want them to understand that a transaction is taking place when we buy something, i.e. I hand over a sum of money and I get a smaller sum back. In primary school, I learned about money by counting out plastic coins and paper notes and calculating what I could afford to purchase. At home, I was taught that I could earn gold coins by doing harder chores and silver ones for easy ones, and these methods rely on the existence of money in physical form. What are your suggestions on ways we could teach kids basic financial understanding in the future in the future when cash and eventually plastic cards are phased out?
Really good question, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
I think you've got to...
And what are you doing with your kids?
Well, they started, I guess, a lot of the time they've been in the cash era, so we've still been able to do that. I think you've just got to persevere. You've got to hold on to cash as long as possible. I mean, it sounds stupid, but we do have plastic coins and paper notes at home still. I don't think the kids have used them for a long time, but, they had a little pretend shop at some stage. So I think you've just got to keep trying to do it. Keep trying to pay cash every now and again with your kids or get them to pay cash occasionally.
Because it is true that if all you're doing is tapping your phone, it doesn't feel like you're spending money, right? It's very seductive. It's sort of imaginary. And also, of course, someone's clipping the ticket.
Yeah. I guess the other thing to do, and, teachers often suggest this in kids' reports, is to take the kids to the supermarket and get them to sort of start adding stuff up, what's this basket of products worth? So maybe that's another way to do it.
There's also quite a few apps that help you teach your kids about money.
Yeah.
In various ways. So if you Google apps that teach kids about money, if you just Google that, you'll find a whole list of them. I did that and they're all there.
Yeah.
But I won't go through them. But
Brady makes a point, like the struggle for parents is it's easy to just tap the phone. But if you go and get at the start of the year $100 in gold coins, you actually can do this a bit throughout the course of a year. But you've just got to make the effort and go do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Tom of Tasmania says, I've just heard Marcus Padley on News Breakfast suggesting rates, specifically the Australian 10-year bond yield, will return to about 1% soon. So that's its 40-year downtrend target. COVID inflation has been tamed, he thinks. Would you care to comment?
Well, I reckon that if the 10-year bond yield goes to 1%, we're in recession.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it.
So firstly, I think Marcus is wrong. I don't think we are going to have a recession to that extent. I mean, we've had a 18-month per capita recession. The bond yield's holding up. I actually don't know what it is at the moment, but
3.9.
3.9. There you are. So I think it's actually more likely the bond yield goes up, to be honest.
Yeah. I think the bond yield's probably pricing in a couple of rates cuts already.
Yeah.
Preemptively. So I can't see it getting to 1%, not for a very long time.
No, I don't think. Well, that's right.
I don't think we're in that world anymore.
No. Jay says, is there a way to make it equal or fair for 5 potential family members to buy into an existing family holiday property, but at different stages? Say, if the second participant was to buy in today and the last member to buy in around 6 to 8 years' time, should we go off the original total mortgage plus interest? Do you understand what this is about?
Yeah, they're trying to... I guess a lot of families might do this. Perhaps they've inherited a holiday house. Not everyone can afford to buy in at the moment, but they can buy in over a longer period of time. How do you figure out how to divide it up? I mean, I think, Jay, you're on the right track, figuring out going off the total original mortgage plus the interest amount and the average utilities to try and figure out an all-in cost. Jeez, it's bloody difficult, though. I think The other way would be to try and work out what the house is now, deduct what one family member has already contributed and divide the rest of it. But, geez, it's hellishly complicated. I guess I'd have to... The one thing I'd say is go and get an independent umpire. Go and get someone else who's not in the family to come up with a schematic. Yes, you're going to have to pay someone a little bit of money.
But if they're inheriting it, they're not paying for it.
Well, I don't know. We don't know.
So presumably it's about the mortgage. Who can afford to service the mortgage?
Yeah.
And if one or two of them can afford to service the mortgage now, then okay, they have to do that. And whoever is able to do it in 6 to 8 years' time, then
yes. But then you have to have a way to repay the people, the original mortgage payers. I think it's hugely... I'd get some professional advice, Jay, and I would have everything written down so everyone knows where they stand, and Christmas is still pleasant for everybody.
Yeah. Tim's got a question just defending buyers' advocates.
It does. He does finish this with a really good question. Why don't more people use this service? Most people would never buy $1 to $2 million of equities without professional advice, but why is this the default option for property? Not a bad point.
Yeah, my son's buying a house at the moment and is using a buyer's advocate, and he's somebody who knows all about property. He's been reporting on it for ages, but he's been singing the praises of this buyer's advocate, saying how terrific what a good service it has been. So, yeah.
Tim also makes the point that, he says he interviewed 3 buyers advocates before deciding on one, and they were able to lock in a fee at the start of the process. So I think
as long as you're not paying a percentage of the price,
yeah,
and as long as the buyer's advocate gets paid without a transaction. I mean, if you've got a buyer's advocate who only gets paid if you buy if you buy a house, they're going to be keen to ensure that you do buy a house.
Yeah, which you are too, I guess.
Well, that's right. But
yeah. I think just go in with your eyes open. Ben says, imagine if I instructed you to form a rules committee for netball and you selected people that had never played, don't know anyone that's ever played, and hadn't even watched it before, instead making all decisions by reading stats about the game. I'd say you failed. So why is the RBA made up of people who have not only never experienced poverty themselves, but have never known anyone who has, yet they make policy decisions that affect these people the most? Here is a philosophical question for you.
I don't really
know
what to say about this. I mean...
this is the old sort of, do you need to be a murderer to be a judge type thing. I'm exaggerating. Well,
the people on the RBA board are generally business people, or others, economists who basically understand the economy, understand business. But it's true that they haven't experienced poverty.
Yeah. Yep.
So would that make a difference to their decisions, or would the RBA be less likely to increase interest rates if someone on the board had been poor?
Not sure. This is the problem the RBA faces, isn't it? That you don't have your interest rates are a blunt tool, and you need to make policy for the whole of the economy, not just parts of it. So an understanding and appreciation of, people in or near poverty would be helpful, but would it change their decisions? Because you're not trying to make decisions for a select group of people.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the decisions they have to make are based on the aggregate economy, and the economy is what the ABS says it is.
Yeah.
That's it. The economy is stats. It isn't anecdotal.
Yeah.
Like, you can't really make decisions about individual circumstances based for the whole economy, because then you'll be influenced by things that are incorrect. I mean, there's always going to be poor people. There's always people experiencing poverty no matter what's going on in the economy.
Yeah.
So you can't make decisions based on them.
Yeah, I think Ben's point for more empathy is well made, but the makeup of the board, I'm not sure that that's the right yardstick.
David just says we had a question about an elderly lady looking to access her home equity. We did not mention the government home equity access scheme. It's true. We didn't mention that.
A couple of people have mentioned that in their questions
right.
today.
So, servicesaustralia.gov.au, Home Equity Access Scheme. And the current rate is 3.95%, according to David.
I had a quick look at this. I mean, it is tied to your pension.
Yes.
So you do need to be aware of that, but
it's quite limited. I mean, it's not available to everybody.
Yeah.
It's got a I can't remember what the cap on it is, but it's not as expansive as private sector schemes.
Yeah, but David's right. I mean, you'd be mad not to have a look at it.
Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
As a starting point too.
Just back to Reserve Bank. Matt says, is there a better metric for the Reserve Bank to use to affect the economy? Interest rates are a tax on young people, handed to comfortable homeowner, and a handout to homeowner boomers. Maybe a better mechanism would be land tax. Federally unified land tax systems as a single progressive set of rates. And yeah, that's right. I mean, you're right, Matt, but it's never going to happen.
Yeah, it was interesting. One of the big things at the Property Summit was stamp duty and how it is, how much it's affecting the property sector at the moment. Not just first home buyers, making it harder for first home buyers, but making it harder for downsizers to move. The upfront cost of stamp duty is a bar to empty nesters getting out of their 4 or 5 bedroom homes. There was suggestions there that moving to some sort of land tax would be a good idea. The counterpoint, though, is the New South Wales government tried that and got kicked out.
Well, it came up in the Q&A thing on Monday, a bit after when you bailed out, James.
5 minutes in, yeah.
5 minutes in.
I can't take the yelling. Oh, man. Anyway.
Nobody was yelling.
Oh, it's...
I was the only one who yelled. I yelled at Michael Sukkar.
Did you?
I did. Well, it's because he's saying... He was talking about the how they're against foreign capital coming in. We're going to stop these foreign private equity coming in and buying Australian houses and building Australian houses. I said, what are you talking about? You know... You're trying to prevent foreign capital. Of course we need foreign capital. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
I mean, anyway. But yes, the stamp duty, it's an important tax for state governments. It's fine. Get rid of it, but you've got to come up with something else.
Yeah. Well, land tax, but no one's going to federally unify land tax.
Sort of land tax is like amortising the stamp duty, right? So instead of paying a lump of stamp duty at the start, you pay a land tax over the period you own the house.
But that's good.
Well, that's fine, but the state governments can't wait for the money.
I know,
right? They need the money now.
But this is
so what the New South Wales government did was to ask the federal government if they would cover them.
Yeah.
Right. We'll move to a land tax system if you can get us through the first few years of missing out on the stamp duty. The federal government said no.
Yeah.
We're not going to do it.
But this is
end of story, right?
I know, but we need some big solutions to this stuff. I don't know where the politicians think this is going to end up. Like, we're going to have generations of young people who cannot afford to live anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, where do politicians want this to get to?
I was at a housing forum the other morning. It was homelessness, right? And this guy was brought in from America, Greg Colburn, who's a professor of homelessness at the University of Washington in Seattle, and he's done all this work into what causes homelessness. And the answer is, it isn't any of the things you think of. That it's about the individual who's homeless. They've kind of cross-matched all this data and found that the only thing that causes homelessness is the cost of housing. Yeah. That's what it's about. Homelessness is a housing issue.
Yeah.
And the higher the house prices, the more the homelessness there is. Yeah. That's it. And he was likening it to a game of musical chairs. Basically, you got 10 chairs, 10 people walking around the chairs. When the music's playing, music stops. They take away one chair. There's 9 chairs, 10 people walking around. Music stops. They're all trying to get the chair. The slowest person, the one who's got a broken leg and is a moon boot, misses out on the chair because he's too slow.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with homelessness.
But
I thought it was really interesting.
How many more? How much bigger do we need the homelessness problem to get before governments say, oh yeah, okay, maybe we do need to do some big ass reform? I don't know. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah,
2 days of property. And
I agree. I agree with you. But the thing is,
seeping through, like, these decisions we're making about international student caps now, like, they're not related to anything other than housing.
Sure.
It's all about housing.
It's all about housing. That's right.
And so we
No, but they're all trying to do stuff that doesn't cost any money.
I know, but we cut our nose off to spite our face. The next Robin Cooter is about to come out to Australia as an international student and start a $24 billion business. But we'll have to cap that because we made all these other mistakes in housing.
Sure.
Anyway, where are we?
Your turn, Jason.
This is Jason from Sunny Narry Warren, who says, "Why does James have a fancy columnist title, and why is it called that?" Oh, Jason,
we've got to give you a bit of history here.
Yeah, it's the columnist title is called Chanticleer. Jason,
spell it out. Come on.
Chanticleer, and it is the name of a rooster, a skeptical rooster from Chaucer's Tales, and the rooster. He was a fox. A fox had him in the fox had him by the throat, and he said to the fox, he's flattering the fox, and he said, "You're a fantastic guy. You should, you should tell everyone about how good you are." And the fox did that, and the rooster got away. So, the skeptical rooster is what the column is based on.
And it was started in 1974.
Yes.
With Bob Gottliebson being the first column.
Yes.
And
you were the second one?
I was the second one. But the name of the column was thought up by Vic Carroll.
Yes.
Who was the editor at the time.
Yeah. So there's more history about a silly column name than you ever wanted. But Jason does have a serious question about Ozcan, which is an Australian cannabis company. It was listed under the ticker AC8. They haven't traded in a long while. I find it hard to decipher the info from their website. It seems they haven't paid to remain on the ASX as a listed company. What normally happens to companies from here? Have I lost my shares and hard-earned? We've done a bit of research. And
they have been delisted because they didn't pay their listing fees.
Yes.
So they've been booted out of the ASX. The company still exists, however. You still own shares in this company.
Yes.
You just can't sell them on the ASX.
Yes. And it's not really clear how you might sell them at all at the moment.
Well, it's interesting. It's companies that are delisted or not listed at all. You have to sell them to someone else.
Yeah.
Who you have to somehow track them down.
Yeah.
Who wants to buy them?
So I think you're sort of stuck in purgatory a little bit at the moment, Jason.
I mean, the company hasn't got much. It's got $2.5 million in the bank.
Yes.
Doesn't make any revenue. The only revenue it got in the last quarter was a government grant of $595,000. Well, it was either a grant or a tax incentive, whatever it was. That was the only money that came in the door. They're not paying themselves very much. The money going out the door in the quarter for administration and salaries was $170,000.
Right, it's very lean, isn't it?
So it's not much. I mean, so they're not filleting the company and taking money away.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get a merger up with someone in Germany.
Yeah, European company who I think they already own shares in. So
they might be rescued by this German company. So you might find yourself owning shares in a German company.
Jason, I think you've probably done your hard-earned mainly, but stick with it for a little bit longer.
I'd write it off.
Yeah.
And just move on, and maybe one day they'll be worth something.
We do have a question similar. Edmund has named a couple of other vanishing companies. I signed this, AVZ Mineral and Firefinch. They've similarly been removed from the ASX and, as he says, literally disappeared or removed from one's portfolio. I think you're in largely the same basket.
Look, often these companies do themselves set up a secondary market for their shares, so you can kind of contact the company, and people who want to buy shares contact the company, and they give a price. So it's probably worth writing to the company or ringing them up saying, you got some shares you want to sell. Does anyone want to buy?
Yep.
because the company might sort of put you in touch with a buyer.
CC says, love the podcast. Should be proud the millennials and Gen Z are listening in each week. Question around company share plans. I work for an ASX 20 company with a company share plan. Seems to be two trains of thought. One, sell the shares immediately, pay the tax bill and pocket the money. These people usually think it's not a good idea to have your income and shares linked with the same company. Versus two, keep the shares long term, pay the tax bill each year and hope the good people, i.e. you, that they have hired will produce good outcomes and a higher share price. Thoughts?
I like the second option. I mean, look, if it depends, but I presume you like the company because you work there.
Yep.
You're a part of its success. You're able to help in its success. So, they call it skin in the game.
Yep.
So that sounds reasonable to me.
I agree. And I think the other thing, CC, is often these company share plans involve either free or low-cost shares, discounted shares. So you're usually getting, shares in an ASX 20 company at a sharp discount, which is, not something to be sneezed at. ASX 20 companies tend to be doing okay. As you say, yes, you've got a bit of your wealth tied up in one business, but I don't think it's too much. And yeah, I guess you're aligned to the company's what the company's doing going forward.
It seems reasonable to me. Last question. Julian says, I love your podcast. I'm 34, married, 2 children, 200K in super, average mortgage of 550K. You shouldn't have told us that, Julian. But anyway, because we can't give personal advice. My question is, I've heard the Liberal Party would let homeowners access their superannuation as an offset account to their home loans. My opinion on this is positive. I believe it would get me more involved in my superannuation by maxing out contributions and saving me on tax as well. I also believe it would engage a large portion of millennials too. The only possible downsides I can see is it could drive house prices up if banks take your superannuation into giving out loans, and loss of future superannuation returns could more than offset the less tax saving. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that they're talking about putting it into an offset account. They're talking about using it as a deposit.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
A maximum of 50,000 you can use from your super as a deposit for a house,
which is paid back after the.
So yes, and the thing to know is obviously if you are 34. And you've got 200K in superannuation, which is a lot for someone who's 34.
Yeah.
That's much higher than average. I mean, most people at 34 have got a $50,000 mortgage. $50,000 in super.
Yeah.
So if they use 50K, most people at 34 would be taking their entire super, right?
Yep.
And what they're doing is missing out on the effective compound interest on that 50 grand.
Yes.
So they're robbing their retirement, not of 50,000. But of 50,000 compounded at 9 or 10%, depending on who your super fund is.
Yeah.
Over the following, 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
So it's quite a large amount that's coming out of your super when you retire.
Yep.
And the only way it would work, because you put it back into your house, is if the house price had risen by more than your super would have.
Yeah.
Financially,
that's the way it would financially work. But the practicalities here, Alan, is like if you're a young person of 34 or 40, whatever it is, and you can't access your super for another 27 years, like there is a benefit of having somewhere to live and getting on the property ladder, because in retirement, owning property is pretty important.
That's correct.
So there is a trade-off. We are going to be paying 12.5%.
But there is a question. I think a more fundamental question is our house prices going to keep rising at this current rate from here, and do we want them to? Right. I mean, house prices have been rising in the last 12 months by like 9%. Right. That's more or less the same as super.
Yes.
But if house prices keep rising at 9% or the same as super for the next 40 years, well, we'll all be on the streets, right? There'll be nobody being able to afford a house.
Yeah, yeah.
So there must come a point when house prices stop rising, as much.
Yes.
There must come a point.
There must come a point,
Because nobody can afford them, right?
Yeah, I know.
So there must be a point, at some point, when it is worth having your money in super instead.
Yeah.
And then renting, right? And so your money's compounding in super, tax preferred, at whatever it is, 9% a year.
Yes.
And you're better off doing that and renting than you are with having your money in your house. But I accept that. It doesn't look like that is the situation at the moment.
Yeah.
I do accept that.
Oh, yeah. Look, I think the scheme will be popular. The Libs will go to the election with it. And I think it's one of the options that will be attractive to people because this problem of getting into a house is just so intractable.
Thanks for listening, everyone, to today's episode of Money Cafe. I'm on 2 weeks leave from today. So next week, Effie Zaho's going to replace me while I'm away. She's going to talk to Stephen May next week and James the week after. So send your questions to them, themoneycafe@eurekareport.com.au. Until 3 weeks' time, I'll see you. Alan Kohler, Eureka Report.
Have a great break, Alan, and I'm James Thomson, Senior Chanticleer columnist at the Australian Financial Review.